thanks for joining this event. So I will be presenting you a tool which is called Diversity for Restoration. And it's a tool that is supposed to guide selection of tree species and seed sources for forest landscape restoration interventions, in taking into account also future climate projections. So you will probably be familiar with the global concerns about land degradation processes that are affecting the planet, and also about the major initiatives that have been launched to try to mobilize attention and resources. Maybe the best known is the Bond Challenge, which was launched in 2011, and which set the goal to restore 350 million hectares of degraded land by 2030. And also you are probably familiar with the UN Ecosystem Restoration Decade, which was just inaugurated a couple of years ago, which expanded the mandate beyond terrestrial ecosystems to include also marine ecosystems. So a lot of the restoration is happening in forest ecosystems, and forest landscape restoration has been considered as a general concept that can incorporate different types of interventions that are all focused on restoring ecological integrity in forest ecosystem, and at the same time restoring the flow of goods and services that are supporting livelihoods of rural communities. And it's a very different kind of interventions can fall under this definition. And some are promoting restoration by favoring natural regenerations of forest ecosystems. Some others are more actively restoring vegetation by planting. And this is the part that is most interesting for us because it requires a proper management of forest genetic resources. So in the case of tree planting, based on our experience, we see that a lot of the restoration projects are not really taking into consideration some critical aspects, and forest restoration practitioners often do not have access to the right information to make the right decisions. And we see that generally a very small number of species is used in restoration, mostly the best known, sometimes exclusively exotic species, and also not necessarily matching the site conditions and the restoration objectives. Another aspect is that the seed origin is very rarely considered. So the tool is really trying to address these issues and organizing the information and making it easily available to practitioners. So the tool was originally designed to address restoration in dry tropical forests of Colombia, which are mega diverse ecosystems. So it's really difficult for a practitioner to keep in mind the diversity and make the right decisions. Then it was extended to other kind of forest ecosystem in the dry zones of Ecuador and Peru. Now it's available also for most Central American countries. At the same time, it has been outscaled to African countries. We have a module for Burkina Faso, for Cameroon, and also for the region of Ethiopia. There's a module for Ghana in preparation. For Asia, we have a module for Laos and Vietnam in preparation, and we have also a country module for Lebanon already prepared. So how does the tool work? Basically, the user just needs to identify the location of the planting site, indicate from a menu of options which are the main stress conditions that are affecting the planting site, define the priority in terms of objectives or combinations of these different priorities, and also indicate the climate scenarios to be taken into account while planting trees. And the output is a recommendation in terms of best species suited for the purposes and for the site. Different options are provided according to whether you want to maximize diversity or you want to maximize suitability of the species to the site. And it also provides an indication on where to source the seed and also how to propagate tree species that are in the tool. This is the way the interface looks. It's very simple to use. The first thing is to identify the country, the first step, and then indicate the planting site by either clicking on a map or putting the coordinates. And then you see that the next questions regards the characteristics of the planting site and the objectives, as I was saying before. You need to say how many species you want to use, and also whether you want to exclude exotics or not, or some species you want to exclude from the list of recommendations, and plus other additional options you need to select regarding climate projections. These are examples of the menus. As I said, In terms of site conditions, there's many different options that should be hopefully cover most of the circumstances that the forest restoration practitioners might encounter in terms of soil and water conditions, or other limitations like recurrent fires or fragmentation or grazing pressure. And in terms of objectives, similarly, you find a very broad set of objectives of the planting, from regulating ecosystem services that are desired to different types of goods that are expected. So the tool contains a very large catalog of species, which is built combining literature sources, but also information coming from the ground. So this priority tree species list is generated by scanning the literature and also interacting with local communities. And all the species are systematically characterized based on a common number of traits, of parameters, that are also sourced from the literature, but largely coming also from indications from experts on the ground and communities, which are the best suited to indicate which species are most suited for particular conditions and also for particular uses. There's also a lot of modeling, spatial modeling behind the tool. As I said, you can click on a map and the tool can identify all the species that are expected to be growing in the site, because the tool contains this spatial analysis, which are deriving from the aggregation of occurrence data available, the building of these species distribution models, which are representing the current suitable habitat for the species, but they are also exposed to future projections of climate. So you can also select the future climate scenarios of interest and also the time frame, and the tool will be able to tell you whether the species is going to be present or not in future. So the main selection of species happens through a scoring system. So the species are scored against the objectives. You see the example for erosion control or for the establishment of silvopastoral systems. So all the different traits, which are morphological traits, ecological requirements, recommendations from the local experts, are characterized, but they are also given a weight with respect to the specific objective. So for example, you see the case of silvopastoral system, resprouting capacity. It's an important trait, so it's given like almost the darkest blue color, but fodder and forage provision is even more important, so it's given higher weight. As I said, local knowledge is really a great part of the tool, and especially for what refers to stress resistance and particular uses. Another important feature is the seed zoning approach that is behind the tool, which is providing recommendations on where to get the planting material. So in the first quadrant, you see the tree corresponding to the planting site today, and you see the quadrant corresponds to the range, and the range is divided in different colored zones, which are representing the so-called seed zones, which are areas homogeneous from an environmental point of view, within which you can move planting material without a risk of maladaptation. So once you transfer the planting material from one zone to another, you might be not successful. So we are looking at the present situation with regard to seed zone, but we are also looking into the future, how these climatic conditions are changing and whether the planting site is falling in the same zone as today or in other zones. If this is changing, if the situation is changing, the tool is suggesting a mixed sourcing of planting material. You see on the right the circle, which is basically indicating that 50% of the planting material, in the case represented here, should come from the current planting site, but the other 50% should come from a mix of different sources, which today have the conditions expected in future in the planting site. This is an example of the recommendations generated by the tool. In this case, we have only 4 species, but as I said, you can choose the number of species you want. It indicates also the relative abundance in the mixing, also how the species are scoring with respect to local conditions and objectives, and also from which seed zones you should collect the material. And the seed zones are colored and numbered, so it's easy to relate to them. These recommendations are only a starting point, of course. They provide some options for discussions with rural communities, but they need to be then adapted and tailored to accommodate local interests. So more information is available for free through this publication online. And on the website, you also find the names and of the many contributors and data providers who contributed to the development of the different modules of the tool. I want to spend just a few words about a ramification of the diversity for restoration tool, which is designed for specific interventions around the establishment of agroforestry system for cacao. So the interface is very similar, and this additional tool also provides some indications of spatial arrangements of cacao with respect to the shade tree species that are part of the system. So after filling the filters, the main options that I presented before, the tool generates a list of priority species, shade tree species for cacao, which are scoring best with regard to the objectives, additional objectives that were selected by the user. And the different colors represent the different goods and services that are expected from each and how the different species are performing with respect to these aspects. It provides indications about the spatial arrangements, as I said. It gives information about the seed sources, as for the main D4R tool, but also provides protocols for propagation of the species that are part of the priority list. And this is a new module under development. It provides also a sense of the flow of revenues that are generated by agroforestry systems, combining trees and cacao. This is my last set of slides about another tool which is being developed right now as part of a project funded by Jeff, run in collaboration with IUCN. It's a tool which is called My Farm Trees. You can look it up online, and it's expected to track the planting material from the source, from the mother trees, all the way through nurseries up to the farmers' fields where the trees are planted. And this tool, it's not only able to give us a sense of performance of planting material of different origin, but also to link farmers to carbon markets. So the farmers are going to be paid based on the performance of the trees on their land through a system which is controlled by blockchain technology. You can see this is going to be piloted right now in 2 countries, in Cameroon and Kenya, and it's supported by 3 modular applications which are providing unique identifiers to the material from the source to the farmers' fields. So this is very, very recent development that we are going to try in these countries. And it's supported, as I said, by Jeff, and the effort is conducted in collaboration with a large number of partners in the 2 countries, in Cameroon and Kenya. And with this, I'm finished. Thanks for your attention.